All right, welcome back to Curiosity, Not Judgment. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
Always very glad to have you watching or listening, whatever format you choose to absorb this media in. And speaking of media, this was a big 2 weeks for us as we launched the domain, we launched the website, started getting the content out on YouTube. And I recognize that by the time you see this, the content will have been out for several weeks, but live time, we had built up a little bit of a library before we started putting stuff in the public sphere. And so that's been a steep learning curve for me. Media is changing rapidly. The way that people consume media is changing very quickly. And I found myself really battling my people-pleasing nature because I had somebody in a gentle way already offer a correction, and I felt myself bristle and get a little bit bent out of shape. And it made me curious about, why do I continue to respond that way? Why, after all of these years and well into my adulthood, am I still so stuck on people pleasing? And I'm sure we can go back, and I'm not asking you to play psychologist right now, but it really made me think about the way that I'm wired, my past experiences, and how all of these things blend together in the way that I receive and perceive information, and also then the way that I respond to it. And I'm wondering if you have similar things that you have been made aware of as you are challenging yourself to grow and learn and be curious, and just to step in this world of expanding who you are and how you interact with others.
The unexamined life is not worth living, said somebody much smarter than me. And I think a constant examination is a really good thing. And I think one of the best things I've done in my recent years is to reflect at the end of each day about what went well, what didn't go well, what could have gone better. As I reflect on the things that didn't go well, it's usually around me, I would call it reacting, not responding, in certain situations, and then thinking, man, why do I do that? Why do I act this way? I don't believe this way, so why am I acting this way? And I'm also a people pleaser, so I resemble that remark. And I often say yes before I mean to, even if it should be no.
Yeah.
I sometimes am even triggered by certain situations, and I'm thinking, why? I mean, this doesn't deserve a trigger, right? It doesn't deserve me to get angry or to get upset or defensive. And you and I are both reading a book right now, and it talks about the fact that everything comes up the brainstem, your senses, in through the right half of the brain, and you start responding based on that emotional right brain side of the brain before it gets to the logical part of the brain, the left side of the brain, and actually can process based on values and what your goals are and how you'd like to act. So when you say rewiring, it really is rewiring, because we have a channel that's produced over and over and over again based on beliefs from the past that sometimes isn't a useful channel. And we do get the chance to rewire, and we should take that chance. It takes really deep thinking, though, about why, and asking the question, why do I respond in that way given this situation? And how would I like to respond differently? And really thinking about that. And you have to get it from your left brain all the way back around to your right brain.
Before it comes out of your mouth?
Before it comes out of your mouth.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to do, especially for someone like me who feels like silence is, like, I don't know, the most terrifying thing in the world, and very awkward and uncomfortable. So why not fill the space? And so it's a combination of sitting with things before you respond and working on the right brain responses, the emotional side, beforehand. And I think it's a reasonable effort. It's, again, the difference between shame and guilt, right? Which is I did something bad versus I am bad.
Right.
We are not bad. We just need to think about why did I respond in that way, and think about seeing if we can rewire it. And is it worth the effort to rewire? Sometimes it's okay to say, well, that's a response that I often have, and own it with the people that are close to you, and just say, well, I'm working on that.
Yeah.
But I would expect to see that for a while.
You said triggers, and I think we all have them, whether we recognize what they are or not, in a whole slew of categories. And I think for me, one of my triggers is feeling like somebody doesn't value my intelligence or thinks of me poorly. And so that is something I feel like I have been often very sensitive to, overly sensitive to perhaps, and assuming somebody is thinking that, oh, well, she's not professional enough, she's not this enough, she's not that enough, fill in the blank, whatever, the offense of the moment is. But, I recognize this media can be watched at any time. We just happen to be a few days before Christmas as we are recording this. And our friend John Thurman, who is the one who took all the great photos that are on the website, thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
He's a psychologist, and he has a blog and often sends out material. In his blog this week, he was talking about the trigger that comes from the song "I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus," and that it does something to his wife that just sets her on edge because of a very dysfunctional upbringing. And there was a lot of chaos in the home, and there's something in particular about that song that has caused this very substantial emotional response in her. And you never know the people you're with, whether live time or interacting with them through email, whatever the case may be. Something that gets said, something that's in their environment that sets them off and causes them to respond in a way that's just not really in alignment with their normal everyday personality. But man, we're not privy to that information, and so all we get is what we see in front of us, and those are hard times to ask questions.
They are a hard time to ask questions. The first time, every time I hear the word normal is, what is that? But I understand what you're saying. It's not consistent with what your built experience with that person is.
Right.
And I think that is actually a great time to ask questions. And one of them is, how you doing? Are you okay? How are you feeling? Or even to say, boy, that's unusual, or that was unexpected. Not in a judgmental way, but just in a curious way. Like, oh, wow, okay. Do you need a minute?
Yeah.
And I think that's a very thing to do. I often think back to when I feel comfortable with someone, and when I feel like I want to be vulnerable or open. It's not when someone accuses me of something or makes me feel bad.
Yeah.
It's usually when someone is, lovingly saying something like, "Wow, okay, that's interesting. I'm for you, and I'm for making this work out. I'm interested in your success. How can we find some common ground here? How can we figure out a way to move this forward in a way that benefits both of us, even if it's a very negative reaction." It's very hard to come back with a negative reaction when you've gotten a positive reaction back.
I guess for me, though, it would be to pause long enough to have the wherewithal to ask the question, because I can imagine, going back to that song as a trigger, if I'm sitting across the lunch table from a friend, a song is playing in the overhead stereo, and I'm not even noticing it, but all of a sudden the friend's remark starts getting snippy, or, something has clearly happened. Nothing in me is going to say, oh, there's probably a song that played in the background. I just don't think in that quick manner. And so I guess, how do we make ourselves aware when there's been that shift, when something has happened? How do we step back and ask ourselves the question, like, all right, what just happened here internally before we project it externally?
Yeah, and that's very difficult. I mean, I could sit here and tell you that, well, that starts with being confident in who you are, and your motives in the situation are good, and so it must be something about them. It's not about you. It's very difficult to have that even internal conversation in your head.
Especially when you're a people pleaser.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're thinking, oh, this person's getting snippy because of something I did.
Mm-hmm.
And you instantly start cataloging, okay, what could I have possibly said that upset them? And when it could be nothing.
Right. And probably stop listening because you're going through the mental checklist of what did I say? What did I do? How did I offend?
Mm-hmm. When the answer is to ask questions and be curious about them and where their head is at.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, is this a conversation you want to be in right now? Is a very easy thing to ask. Is this something that, or I mean, to even be blunt, did I do something to make you upset just now?
Mm-hmm.
And of course not. You know, no, it's not about you. I'm just dealing with something else right now. Oh, okay. Do you want to continue the conversation? You want to revisit later? Do you want to? There's many places to go from there, and it really has to do with the situation. There's no simple formula.
Yeah.
It's not an equation. It's like Covey used to say, you can be efficient with things, and there are equations around things. How fast is a can of soda going to get cold in a refrigerator? That's a known equation that you can write and do. But with people, it's all over the place.
Not as formulaic.
No.
Well, so let's shift for a little bit to talk about that personality hang up. I don't know, I'm going to call it for me. That's what I describe my people pleasing as a hang up, because it does trap me a lot in situations where if I weren't focused on what people thought about me, I would have peace, I would have lack of anxiety and all of the right emotions, but instead it's this stew pot going on in my mind and my core. And I know there's a lot of other personality issues that various people struggle with, but when you've got it identified, like I know this is a problem for me, how do you begin to start asking yourself the questions to kind of get to the root of some of these to get some healing?
Well, let's start with the same thing between guilt and shame, right? Versus, I did something bad versus I am bad. Being a people pleaser does not make you bad. And the root of the motivation can sometimes be good. I mean, you want peace in the situation. You're a peacemaker. You want people to feel good about the situation. You want people to be able to move past fear and move towards, a virtuous cycle of good things happening in the situation and in the relationship. So that in itself isn't bad. So really, you kind of have to go past the motivation and past the part of your brain that wants to please others, and then go to what are the specific actions and behaviors that result from that that are not good. So it's not the core of people pleasing is not necessarily bad. The result of the actions are what's bad. It's almost like the old saying of, it's okay to get angry, it's just what you do with that anger, right? So it's okay to want others to be happy around you. It's what are you doing with that? Are you taking that kernel of a good thing? What's the old saying? Even a good thing becomes a bad thing when it becomes the only thing. And it sounds like how you are describing your people-pleasing part of you, and I'm dealing with yours because I can't deal with mine, is that it's a bad thing. Okay, so what about it becomes a bad thing? Because at its core, it's not bad.
Yeah.
So what are the behaviors?
It's a peace robber.
A peace robber. Okay, so the part that becomes bad is you become anxious. You become the person who wants to make everybody happy when that's just not possible. And then does it come down to a control issue?
What are you saying there, Gary?
I'm just saying, I know for me, it's what am I trying to control?
Right.
Am I trying to control the environment around me? Am I trying to control others around me? Because I guarantee that doesn't work.
Right.
I know for a fact. Now, I can sit here and say that doesn't work. When I'm in the situation, it's difficult for me to identify the fact that it's a control issue for me.
Yeah. I'm guessing, I don't know the science behind it or the psychology behind it, but I'm guessing that control issue really bleeds into a lot of different personality, I'm going to say disorders. I don't mean it as a clinical diagnosis, but things that we do that are maybe atypical or unhealthy. I'm going to guess control is the core of a whole lot of those because, as human beings, I think we like to have some measure of control. We want to know, we're secure. We want to know we have safety, both physically in a home and financially with a job and health around us. We want to control everything that we can in order to feel safe. But then when elements start getting introduced that remove our control, it starts to throw kind of our internal, peace scale all haywire. And I'm sure it manifests itself in all kinds of ways, but I think one of the biggest struggles for me, hands down, is times when I don't have security of what comes next. And it becomes one of the most volatile places that I can find myself in because of just feeling so utterly out of control.
Well, now you've gone there, right, with the control thing. And then what is behind the desire to control? Because a lot of things come down to the basis of fear. And I fear that if I'm not in control of the situation, that I can't get what I want. Or probably more to the point in your case, I fear if I get out of control that people will become unhappy or unhappy with me. And so what is that fear-based issue? What is it that you fear? Is it the fear of not getting something that you want? Is it the fear of somebody else having power over you? Is it the fear of, and these are guesses, these are not diagnoses at all, but what is it that you fear? And why do you even fear things being out of control?
Right.
Because basically the world around us is out of control.
Yeah.
It's certainly out of my control.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to me, and this is something that I'm working through, pondering, trying to learn. I'm a person of deep faith, and I have said this to several people. I know that I know that I know that God has got me. I know that we have never been left without in terms of, I've never had to ask somebody for food. I've never had to worry that we couldn't pay our mortgage. We have always been provided for. And yet, if in my natural things start to get shaky, the job's unstable, some health situations come up, and the future is not as secure as I think, all of a sudden that rock solid faith starts to get some holes punched in it, because do I really believe what I say that I believe when things start getting wobbly?
Right. Somebody made a great observation with me lately from somebody I get triggered by, and said, models are always as good or bad as they are. They're models. Models are not the thing. They try to look at the thing and come up with a framework around it. But Maslow's model says that we all need our basic physiological shelter, food, water, air, and then you go up from there and all the way up to this thing called self-actualization. And where are you in different relationships? So I have my relationship with my wife, for instance, and I'm always up at the top, right? I feel the love and security that I need from that model, and we're up there at the top. Well, what if I took that same and just assumed that that's my goal, is to create that in this relationship? Wow, this person doesn't deserve it, they don't give me da-da-da. What if you acted as if that relationship was at that same level and acted there? So to put it more simply, if your best friend says something to you and your worst enemy says something to you and it's the exact same, you're going to perceive it totally differently.
Right.
So what if I could perceive anything that this person says as coming from the assumption that they're for me, they love me, they want the best for our relationship and all of our dealings going forward? And what if I took the same approach? And it's not even fake it till you make it. It's more of how does it change my paradigm to think of someone in a situation in the same respect that I do with someone that I truly love? What if I could do that? Wouldn't that make the relationship better? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Now, is it easy? No. this person who triggers me has a long history of doing things to me that I perceive as not for me,
Right.
as not loving, as not giving, as not considerate, as not selfless. And so for me to just pretend that that's okay, that's hard.
Yeah.
But would it improve the situation? Yes, I've been trying it and it has. But it's hard to do. It's one of those things. It's not complicated, it's just hard.
So I'm curious about this now because I'm thinking of a relationship that I have and making an assumption that this person has my best interest in mind and how that would shift the conversation. Do you see a potential downside to walk into a situation like that, assuming they have your best interest in mind, and perhaps they don't?
Sure.
Is there a negative?
You could be taken advantage of.
Okay.
But if you think about it in life, are you really going to be taken advantage of? I mean, is it? It doesn't usually go there. There are those situations, and there are codependence situations that we want to stay away from,
Sure.
and make sure that we don't fall into that trap. But by and large, if you swung the pendulum a little bit in all of your relationships towards that,
Yeah.
are you going to get hurt? Probably not. I'm not saying go all the way there.
Sure.
I'm saying think of it differently. The paradigm shift is the issue, not the actual pretending that that person is great.
Right.
Just looking at them differently.
So is there maybe just some general questions we can begin to ask ourselves to be curious in a situation where we're triggered, somebody next to us is triggered, you have maybe a volatile, working environment or a volatile relationship with somebody, and you really want to assume the best? Are there some questions that we can start asking of ourselves and others to be curious about how we can change the dynamic of that relationship?
I think there are. I think one of them is to say, investigate, why does this person trigger me? What is it about them and their actions that trigger me? There's the old adage that the people that we dislike the most often have attributes that we ourselves have. So it's almost like looking in the mirror. But so looking at that is, okay, why does this person trigger me? Is it because they have power over me or perceived power over me? Is it because things that they do affect me? Is it that their behaviors have a profound effect on who I am as a person? Probably not. Right? But do I perceive that they do? Maybe. Right? So I think starting with those questions is always good. But then thinking about it just before you go into any kind of talk, one-on-one relationship situation with that person, what can you do ahead of time to make sure that you're at your best? I certainly would not have a conversation with someone who triggered me when I was hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
If you can avoid it.
If you can avoid it.
Right.
You can't always avoid it. But if you could set yourself up as much as possible, just like you would to drive on a long time for a vacation, you'd get plenty of rest. You'd make sure that you were. Now, it's always good to not be in that situation of hungry, angry, lonely, tired anyway. But for sure, but you can do that and take advantage of it if it's your best friend or your spouse, right? And unfortunately, they're going to get a little bit of less of you, but at least it's manageable and you'll survive it. I certainly wouldn't go into that situation if I could help it with the person who triggered me. So setting yourself up for success. Why does that person trigger me? And being curious about that, and really spending some quiet time, some 20 minutes with anything is a really good time frame to do it. And then second, how can I prepare myself better for a conversation that helps me find common ground with that person so that we can work together better? And then I'm sure there's a third, fourth, and a fifth, but the other one that comes to mind is, are there common ground things that we can have together where their motivations, my motivations, their goals, my goals match up? If there are not, that's a whole different set of conditions. Okay, then why am I in this relationship? Is it a codependent relationship? Is it something I should re-examine? Not that you just get rid of people. Some people you can't. If this is the situation with a daughter or a son, well, guess what? You're stuck with that in a
Yeah.
good way, and you need to work that out. But if it's not,
Yeah.
is there a change that needs to be made?
Mm.
And either in the expectations of the relationship or the relationship even of itself.
Yeah.
And so those three things I would think would be easy three.
Okay.
That would be a suggestion off the top of my head. I think if you're thinking more creatively about how to get unstuck in certain situations with certain people, then those three are fine to start with, but you could come up with your own.
Sure. Absolutely. I think that's a really good place to start, and maybe this episode gets named the trigger episode. I don't know. Certainly we've all found ourselves in those situations, whether it be because of holidays, whether it be, a work relationship, or as you said, it can be an intimate relationship in our immediate family, that there's just this constant state of conflict, and to start to really be curious about why, things are the way they are, and how do we pursue something better. And so I always want to refer people back to the website, curiositynotjudgment.com. We've got a contact form. If you've got some questions you want to add to the list, we can flesh those out, fill out a little bit more expansively those things that we can start to think through and question as it pertains to some unhealthy relationships, or triggering episodes. And certainly, if you've had some successes or failures in this regard that you feel comfortable to share, we'd love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
So please feel free to use that, that contact form right there on the website, curiositynotjudgment.com. Easy for me to say. All right. Well, as always, thank you for your time and attention. And Gary, thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.